Okay, so this is going to be a quick video because you have two research articles to read this week. One of them we already went over last week or yes, last week in class. So before Paul came in to talk to us, it was the paper that sort of went over those five different types of exercise as well as the effect that those have on different markers of health. We sort of went over this really intimidating table too. Again, this paper could be extremely helpful for your final, so I highly recommend taking a look at it. If you have questions, please come talk to me. Your final will be posted at the latest by Sunday, so you have lots of time to come and ask me questions. How do I interpret this table? How do I find research that applies to this aspect of the final? So please come see me if you have questions that come up. I wanted to introduce one other paper that I think will be beneficial for your final. But before I do that, I want you to answer this question, and it could be for yourself, could be for somebody else, but what are key things that you feel like make you or people in general more likely to engage in physical activity? Just take like 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, jot some things down. What do you think associates with higher levels of physical activity? I'm going to pause here for a minute and just give you some time. Okay. So I hope you've come up with at least a couple of things. Feel free to pause the video and keep sort of jotting some things down. One thing that I hope you've learned through this class is that there are answers to your questions. There's an answer to this question. But in order to really absorb learning, it's often helpful for us to predict things and then find out what the actual answers are. So that's why I often will do this. I'll ask you a question and then I'll present evidence that sort of tries to answer that question. So this is from a Tross et al. 2002 paper. It's a little bit old. I should update this at some point, but I think it's a really simple figure to interpret, and I'll walk you through it. The citation for this paper is in the PowerPoint notes. So if you would like to use this for your final, you can go in and cite this. So this is looking at a determinant of adherence to physical activity. So what makes people likely to engage in and maintain physical activity? So looking at demographic variables, sorry, let me get my laser pointer. So we're looking at demographic variables, psychological variables, behavioral attributes and skills, and then this list continues on to the next two slides. What they did was they compared a meta-analysis to sort of an updated review. And the double negative means there's a strong negative association between this variable, so age, and adherence. And this is an older review. So in the older reviews, there was a strong negative association here. In the updated review, also a strong negative association because you see that double negative. Okay. In if you're in a blue collar occupation, okay, so maybe more of a physically demanding job, you are also less likely to engage in and adhere to a physical activity program. The evidence isn't quite as strong there, so that's why you only see that one negative. Now we go down to childless. If you are childless, you are more likely to engage in and adhere to an exercise program. Again, not super strong evidence, but positive association there. And then this graph goes really nicely in order for us. We have gender. If you are male, you are more likely to engage in and maintain adherence to a physical activity program. Okay. And then these citations are all of the papers that support that assumption. So it makes sense that this has a single negative and a single positive because there's only two papers supporting those associations. Okay. So demographic variables are generally speaking things that you can't change or that are relatively stable. Okay, so race isn't going to change. Overweight and obesity, that status could change, but ultimately is relatively stable usually. Okay, so if I'm overweight and obese, the old review said there was no association. The new review says there is in fact a strong negative association with being overweight and obese and your likelihood of maintaining or adhering to a physical activity program. Okay, so I'd like you to take a look at the next three slides and sort of go through and see, okay, well, were you correct or incorrect? Did you guess correctly the positive things associated with physical activity adherence or not? And what things sort of surprise you? Okay, I would highly consider you do this. Obviously, this is online, so you don't have to. Okay, but there are three sections here. So we ended at behavioral attributes. Okay, there's a social and cultural factors, there's physical environment factors, there's also physical activity characteristics. So if it's highly intense, less adherence. If perceived effort is high, less adherence. Okay, so in any case, go through, look at these, see what it is, because this will also come in very handy in your final. Okay, this is another great paper looking at predictors and barriers to physical activity adherence. So you can see these are adjusted odds ratios for barriers, enjoyment, and preferences as predictors of the likelihood of engaging in these activities. So I'm going to walk you through this figure so that you can do it for yourself on the next slide. But so these are predictors. So physical activity barriers. So if I listed cost as a barrier to physical activity, so as an individual, I said cost is an issue for me. If I say cost is an issue, then there is a significant association between those individuals and their likelihood for engaging in walking. And those individuals are more likely to engage in walking. So remember, an odds ratio greater than 1 indicates that they are more likely to engage in walking. They're also more likely to engage in moderate physical activity and less likely to engage in vigorous physical activity. And note the p-values, those are all significant associations. Okay. Now, if we look at work, so if I listed work as a barrier to physical activity, I'm less likely to engage in walking, moderate physical activity, and vigorous physical activity. Again, all significant associations because you see those p-values less than 0.05. I want to come down to if you prefer moderate physical activity, you're more likely to engage in walking and moderate physical activity and less likely to engage in vigorous physical activity. Okay, that's that odds ratio below 1. Okay, notice though that was not statistically significant. Okay, so yes, you are less likely, but in a non-significant way. Okay, so make sure you pay attention to those p-values, especially on your final if you're going to reference a paper like this, right? If the p-value is non-significant, then I can't say with confidence that someone who prefers moderate physical activity is less likely to engage in vigorous physical activity because I don't have confidence in this odds ratio. Okay. Okay. I'm going to let you puzzle through that. Again, if you have questions, please come talk to me. This is another great one. So, looking at sedentary behaviors. So I asked you to look at physical activity and sedentary behaviors. For sedentary behaviors, TV viewing, right? Reading, social activities, and then just total sedentary time. Okay. And how these associate with barriers to physical activity, enjoyment of physical activity, and preference for vigorous physical activity. Okay. So again, really some interesting findings in here, and I'm going to let you sort of puzzle through those. Then lastly, I want to encourage you. So this is a paper that you are asked to read this week. So it's called No Time to Lift, Designing Time-Efficient Training Programs for Strength and Hypertrophy. So in the last paper, it doesn't actually cover time as a barrier, but time is often listed as the #1 barrier to engaging in physical activity. And this paper in the introduction talks a little bit about that. So if you want some references for that, go to the introduction of this paper. I would encourage you to, so in class we were going to do this, didn't have time, unfortunately, but I would encourage you to read the abstract and the key points figure, and then go to table 1. Okay, that's going to be your best idea, at least to get an idea of, will I use this in my final paper? Do I like this paper? Am I interested in it? Partly why I wanted to include this paper is because they have this amazing figure that I love. So if you say you don't have time to lift, here's some things you could do. How much should you weight train, right? And it talks about sets and reps as well as number of times per week, number of sets per week. What should you focus on training? So mostly multi-joint exercises, a minimum of one of these three exercises each. So your squat, push, pull. Talks about supersets, talks about avoiding warming up and skipping stretching. Okay. You can agree or disagree with that, but these are some good ideas for time efficient training. Okay. So go take a look at those. Okay. Like I said, your final will be posted at the latest on Sunday. I'm hoping actually it will be posted later today. It's a Friday today. So hopefully I'll have that posted for you. If you haven't sent me your groups yet, I will randomly assign you by Sunday. So just a heads up on that. Okay, I think that's all I have for you at the moment. Good luck with these two papers, and I will see you in class, not this coming Thursday because we've got Thanksgiving coming up, but the next Thursday I will see you in class. All right, bye.